Welcome back, everybody, to Constructive Uncoupling, the podcast devoted to amicable divorces. I'm Judy Weigel, your host and amicable divorce expert. Why? Because that's all I do, amicable divorces. Today we have in studio an author and a gentleman who's going to help all of us tremendously understand how to reach peace and serenity even when we're going through an enormously troublesome experience like divorce. Our guest is Daniel A. Miller, author and real estate investor. The two books that he wrote, well, three books that he wrote, the very first one being How to Invest in Real Estate Syndicates. But that's not exactly why he's here. You can follow up with him separately on that and buy that book. He is here for the second two books that he wrote. The first of this group being Losing Control, Finding Serenity. I read that. It's excellent. And then when I saw the second book that he wrote, The Gifts of Acceptance, Embracing People and Things as They Are, I knew we had to have him here and talk. Thank you, Daniel, for coming. Welcome.
Thank you, Judith, for having me. Look forward to it.
This is going to be a good session. So, Daniel, your teachings regarding control and acceptance are perfect topics for people experiencing divorce. Divorce is a completely out of control experience, fraught with fear and anger, potentially financially devastating, but a life-changing experience that, if approached differently, can enhance our lives rather than destroy them, can't it?
I believe it can, especially if they're working with you, I'm sure.
Thank you for that. And by the way, you have been divorced yourself, that is true?
Yes, I have.
Okay, so you can actually speak from experience there. Well, your first book was on control, and your second book was on acceptance. In the divorce arena, a divorce makes us feel out of control. We try and exercise control because we believe it will make us feel better. Except we can't, and it doesn't. Acceptance is what actually makes us feel better. So the book on acceptance, here's the impetus for writing it, and I think it's important to pull your background in for the motivation. This was horrible. Your house slid down a hill. Now, anybody who lives in Los Angeles understands that this is not the most unusual concept because our whole city is built on a hill. And when it rains, which it didn't often do, but then it did big time around 10 years ago or so, houses were slipping off their pads. So your house slid down the hill, then your son's room caught on fire, and unfortunately your business partner betrayed you. We compare this to a marriage. The end of a marriage is like your house sliding down a hill. As parents, we feel like the other spouse has lit a match to the marriage, son's room being on fire, and the divorce process feels like your life is burning out of control. We can easily feel betrayed by our partners, our other spouses, who actually may have betrayed us. And we can engage in a costly court battle for years like you did with your business partner and lose everything. All true?
All true.
And you lived through it, and here you are talking about it. So, in the process of becoming peaceful and finding serenity, do we have to deal with control first and acceptance second?
I think now I can say you deal with both of them concurrently. Because when you're accepting, you're not controlling. And when you're controlling, you can't be accepting. So they're two sides of the same coin. For me, because I was a controller extraordinaire, my focus, that's why from the first book, was trying to find ways to reduce my compulsion to control. But before that, I needed to really become fully aware of the harm that it was causing me over many years. So it proceeded with the idea of letting go of control. And I like to say the only way that you can really gain some sense of control in your life is by, quotes, like losing control. And that's in the title. In other words, the more we seek control, the more our lives are out of control. So it's like inverse. And I truly believe that because there are so many things that we can't control, that we are powerless over. And the more we try to engage, to push, to persist, or whatever it may be in controlling means, it exasperates our situation. So in a divorce, and you're more the expert than I am on this, but the more we're trying to control in any kind of a dissolution or divorce proceeding, and very closely related, and I write about it in both books, is dealing with adversaries, business adversaries. And I have a chapter in the new book on accepting our foes. And I think in divorce, probably we think of the other side as our foe.
We do, unfortunately. Yeah. We do. The one we used to love or accepted is now our foe. And I try very hard to get that idea out of people's heads, especially if there are children involved.
Sure.
Because you will always remain connected through your children,
sure.
will you not?
Yeah.
Did you have children when you got divorced?
Yes,
What
yes,
was that like for you?
Well, it was very difficult, but I have the blessing now that I have 3 children from 3 different women. They get along well. We have gatherings with my exes and my current, and it's not divisive in the least. So it can be done, not that it's done overnight, but certainly I think a lot relates to my willing to let go of things, because that's what got me into many problems in the first place. But I have to give a lot of credit to my present wife for really pulling this all in and being secure enough to see the importance of the children remaining bonded to their parents.
So she was the one that actually tried to bring the 2 previous mothers together with those children?
Yeah, she was the one that, whether it's a Hanukkah dinner or a holiday dinner or a celebration, would want to invite everybody. And it's worked out well. I think that's obviously the ideal situation to be in. And
it's
you,
picture book.
And you have to have, mature adults, I guess. But also, like you say, I think adults that see the reality of what they need to accept, see the importance of of their children, being their well-being, they're having peace and serenity, they're not having to be placed in conflict-ridden situations, all of that. And that's why, to me, acceptance can pull all that together,
Was a key indicator that maybe your children weren't doing well in previous relationships where you were no longer going to be together? Because the reason why I ask this, Daniel, is that we talk all day about best interest of the child and keep negative comments away from the children, don't discuss any issues with the other parent with the children. It's unbelievably hard. Things come out of parents' mouths when they maybe don't intend to, or they really don't see. I've heard people say, but the kids should know everything, shouldn't they?
I think kids do know everything from both parents. That's what I've learned in my case, is that my children know so much more about me than I ever realized. They already know pros and cons, I believe, of their respective parents, so that they don't need to be reminded of the shortcomings of the other parent. I think that puts them in a very uncomfortable position. I think it makes it very difficult to form any kind of a bond where they're going to trust you and speak to you and open up to you. And I think I feel very blessed with my children that they're trusting enough of me to open up and share their concerns and issues. I think that's directly related to my, over the years, and many years, learning not to control. And control also means being opinionated, being judged, being critical, being harsh, all those types of things. And what acceptance means, or letting go of control, it means listening to them. And that can be a very healing dynamic.
That was wonderfully said. Can you remember to say it one more time? I think it bears repeating. I do this all the time.
My little nuggets just sort of come out every now and then, but basically, the ability of a parent to just listen without comment, without judgment, is very healing for the child. I think it's for not only the child, for whoever we're engaged with, because so often we interrupt. We don't want to hear the person out. We don't want to try to get in touch with their internal feelings. And by listening, I know in my case, it has allowed my children to open up. I have learned, I have gone from a person that would freely offer advice and opinions to one that doesn't unless asked. And I have also found that since I don't offer, I'm more often asked. And that's when they will listen to what I have to say. And even then, I'm very cautious on how I express it. Because one thing I've really learned is I'm very different from my children. They're all different from each other. We all process things differently. And this is another part of acceptance that I write about. And it's, in fact, I just wrote a post this week on my blog, humility. What does humility mean? And how does it relate? What is the link between humility and acceptance? And humility, the way I'm using it, is what we believe is or know is right for us doesn't mean it's right or best for anyone else, including our children.
This is such an enormous lesson for all parents, because isn't it the natural inclination of a parent to want your children to do things as you do them, to think as you think,
Sure.
to approach life as
Sure.
you approach life? Otherwise, you're a little concerned for them, right?
Right.
So giving up control is giving up the need to have your children replicate you, right?
Yes.
In thought, word, and deed.
Right.
And I love when you said that acceptance really is listening. Control is offering judgment.
Yes.
Acceptance is listening.
Yes, amongst other things, but definitely is listening.
What's the fear that we may have naturally as human beings if we are around people that don't think like us? What's the fear?
I think the fear is that somehow, we're going to be harmed. What they say or do may harm us. And that's another thing I like to emphasize and actually write about. And I believe it definitely would apply in a divorce context, is I think it's naturally human behavior, or the nature of humans is to state and believe in their own personal interests. Okay, I think that's normal, and your interests may be different than mine or opposite of mine. Right? That doesn't mean that you're out to harm me, and that I think that's the one thing when I write about accepting our foes, or accepting our ex-mate or whatever, mm-hmm. is not to assume that they are out to hurt me, but rather they are guided by, yes, their self-interest, but they're guided by their own fears and anxieties. It might be fear of financial consequences from a divorce. It might be fear I'm now single, and what am I going to do to find someone else, or how am I going to go about that? So a lot of those are fear-based things. The more the other person can sort of understand that, and that somehow try to be able to address that in a calm manner, so to speak, I think that's what can lead to a little bit more to what you call your amicable, resolutions. Is that right. And again, it's the hearing the other person, and I'm sure that you, as being sort of a mediator in that, can provide some guidance in that process, as I'm sure you do, so that you can have a meaningful discussion. And the same thing, I'm not going to get into politics, but I've asked in a lot of my media interviews, how does it all apply to politics? It's very similar. Is we need to be able to listen, and I talk and I write about having an acceptance conversation. An acceptance conversation can be a means to more peace in our lives, and I truly believe that. It's a challenge, very difficult. Doesn't mean you can't try and start.
It's doable, and here's how it works in mediation. I try my best at the very beginning of the mediation session to say, this is going to be a conversation that leads into a negotiation, but it's going to be different than at your kitchen table. And what we're going to do is not interrupt and not and listen, because if you listen without an agenda, you're going to have your opportunity to talk. Take notes if you want to jot down an idea. But what we don't do when we argue, before we get into mediation, which is why we need mediation, when we argue, we don't ever let the other person get their sentences out. We are the other person. Our sentences don't get finished. And it's in the other half of the sentence that we will find our commonality. But we just don't let the other person do it. Fear.
Fear. And the acronym for fear that I write about is, there's several. Future events already ruined, FEAR. Future events already ruined. And I'm sure within the divorce context, there's a lot of that speculation going on, how my life's going to be ruined, how I'm going to be harmed. Another, I think, useful acronym is false evidence appearing real. False evidence appearing real. It's fear. Both those are fear. And the more we can see that and try to step back from that and have that meaningful pause and try to look at I like to say the underlying, quotes, objective facts, and I'm sure that's where you would come in the process, is to help point out the objective underlying reality. And that's what acceptance is I define acceptance is it's accepting the underlying reality, the what is of a situation or of a relationship. And I'll add to that, without negative feelings. And what I mean with that is without resentment, particularly, and without judgment. And that's hard to do, but that's what really true acceptance is you try to get to what I say is a neutral mindset, so that you can see the underlying reality. Here's our situation. We have 3 children. We have these expenses. We have these assets, whatever. This is what's real. This is what exists. If I can accept those things, that allows me then to examine the real, true, and meaningful choices that I have within that context. So I like to say, when you accept what is, it lets you discover what might be. And that's what I have in the book several times. That's a theme of the book. You need to accept what is if you want to learn to discover what might be.
And what might be could be a uniquely wonderful, refreshing relationship with the again, if you have children. I focus a lot on the co-parenting aspect, but this can apply to anybody. You are going to be together co-parenting.
Yes.
So this is so very important to be able to do. And one of the things you said at the very beginning of the book on acceptance was, accepting ourselves is the first step. And then understanding that accepting our circumstances doesn't mean condoning them, just accepting the reality it presents.
Right. We're not excusing what someone's done or the situation. That's when you're accepting, you're not condoning or excusing. You're coming back. What's the underlying reality, and trying to get rid of that resentment and that judgment, because that really deters you from in any way meaningfully accepting.
Well, that occupies your mind more than any ability to be creative and free and happy.
Yeah, you're not going to see your options and choices.
You also said something very interesting on page 10 in the book on acceptance, and that is, shame, insecurity, and low self-esteem are challenges to accepting that we're getting. They're challenges for acceptance, and they're challenges when we're accepting getting divorced. It really does a number on your head.
Oh, sure.
Initially, failure, right?
Sure.
So how do we work through that?
Well, that's a challenge too, but we learn from failure. When we accept failure, and what I write about, I have that chapter, Accepting Failure, is not to pass judgment on ourselves. And then sometimes, we will come to the conclusion that it's failure when maybe it's not. Maybe our expectations were overly high about a person or situation. So if we're expecting too much, Anything short of that, we might view as failure. So going forward, and this could be going forward maybe with another relationship, we can, and this gets back into the control thing, and acceptance, is try to moderate our expectations of the other person, what we expect from them, so that we don't sort of fall back into the same trap, so to speak, you know.
You know, this is interesting. First of all, there are two shows with two different characters that show opposite sides of the same coin of acceptance. Sarah Jessica Parker has a show on HBO called Divorce.
Yes.
She's the quintessential person that keeps arguing with her husband. She's carrying the marriage argument forward. When he's moved on, he has another relationship, but she can't stop herself, and it's influencing the kids. They're moving away from her and towards him.
Sure.
The other parent, right?
Sure.
And so just to keep your own relationship intact with your children, you have to let go of those arguments and accept.
Yes. And that's, I think, I haven't seen the show, but there's probably a lot of fear-based part of what she's going through. I don't know, but yes.
Accept and appreciate. So when we're not accepting the other person, we're not able to appreciate the good things.
That maybe they're a good parent, right? That maybe what they're doing is giving love to your child as well. And I think that's a really key. And I know in my case, I truly believe that my exes are good parents. You know, they may parent differently than me. They may be a little different than me, but I know that they are giving and providing love and support to my children. You know,
in their own way.
In their own way.
Mm-hmm. I forget what I was watching the other day, but it said each parent will have their own unique relationship with the children post-divorce, and you have to let it happen.
Yes, and I know in my case that happened. I became closer with my children afterwards. Maybe because I had more one-on-one necessarily through the co-parenting. So even though the pain of divorce, and it is very painful, or separation is, I gained a lot by a stronger and a closer relationship with my children.
So isn't that interesting that there can be a very positive outcome with divorce? It doesn't have to have the negative connotation.
Right, it does not. I agree.
As it does.
Yeah.
Then there's another celebrity, Denise Richards, who used to be married to Charlie Sheen. And Denise is an interesting character. I know that in your real estate business, you really dealt with a lot of very high-end individuals in Los Angeles, right?
Yes.
And control was a key. We have a control freak town here. There's a lot of money, therefore there's a lot of control going around,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Well, last night on the second reunion of the Beverly Hills Housewives on Bravo, Denise talked about her marriage and then subsequent divorce to Charlie Sheen. They had 2 daughters together. She recognized Charlie's issues, and she said, I'm not a saint, I have my own, but Charlie's were far more publicized, far more dramatic, with drugs and alcohol and other female relationships that he brought into the marriage. But she wanted to live close to him, and she wanted to shield her children from everything negative. And she jumped in, and whenever Charlie needed her, she came. Just so any issues that they were having would not spill over into the children. She tried to keep them separate, which I thought was amazing. I just wanted to share that with you and the audience.
Yeah, no, it is. It is amazing. I think those are one of the areas that we can't totally control again. You know, is you have a child living in 2 different households. I have a very close friend that's a elder grandparent and is a good grandparent to his 3-year-old grandchild. But his daughter's life is very chaotic, to say the least. So his concern is what's going on with his grandchild when the grandchild's not with him and his wife, right? So, and I've discussed that with him, but he's ultimately, and I think in some divorce situations, ultimately you're powerless over a lot of this. And what we talked about, and I hope this is true, and I believe it to be true, is the time that we are with our child and that what we can give to our child may be enough to see them through their own trials and tribulations with the life, maybe with the ex-mate. But I don't know, like you say, well, she would go over there every day or whatever you're saying.
Anytime we called her for help,
good for her.
He needed help a lot.
Yeah, good for her. But I don't know that situation always. That he allowed that to happen too. You're not gonna, you're gonna have people that no, I don't want the ex over here. So I think probably more cases is when there's a separation or separate living is they're not intermingling that much like during the day. So I'm talking about. I think what is within our power, and this is a part of acceptance. I have to accept that I can't always control or have much say in what the other side's doing, unless I know there's really harm, inflicted. That's something else. Then you can go to court and do whatever you have to do. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about maybe different parenting styles or different things. I think. What we can do best is the time we have with our child is to give them our best. And children are much more resilient than I think most parents believe. And I don't think that's wishful thinking, but it's maybe not always that way. But it's one of the risks, I guess, of separation and divorce. But the risk of staying together in certain cases can be just as bad or maybe worse to the impact on the child. If living in a divisive household, that's not a good thing either.
You said something very interesting about unless there's some harm that's going to come to the child. And here's where control, denial, we haven't even gotten to denial. You said letting go of denial is one of the key issues in acceptance. And yes, one of the key issues in acceptance. But when you're co-parenting with a substance abuse addict, this is something I see all the time. It's going. So you're the parent that's not substance abused.
Right.
So what's going on. You want to make nice with the other parent, but you have these children you have to look out for.
Yes.
And so the parent who's not addicted feels very guilty at the beginning of asking for sole custody. They don't realize that if you don't get sole custody, the children could be taken away from both of you. So you have to exercise control over a situation that would be harmful. You don't have to judge that other parent. You can use a step-up plan that if the parent gets clean over a sustained period of time, they can come back into the co-parenting situation as a vital entity. So, can we twist this a little bit? Where do we draw our lines then with control?
Well, I think you have. I think a parent has a responsibility for the safety and well-being of their child. Okay, and that may take quote controlling actions. Okay, and there may be times where the control may not be effective, but certainly, like I say, it could be with legal action or whatever. But I think you do have a responsibility. So as to where you draw the line is how abusive is the other parent? How bad is it? There are 12-step programs, Al-Anon being one, that the non-addictive parent can go to and join and learn from the experiences of other parents in similar situations, how they handle those situations. But it's a deeply challenging situation, and I can only say what I would do, maybe, if I were in that situation. I think so it's for each person, to determine. But let me express it another way. control is not all bad. We need control in this world. If we didn't have control, it's the type of control I write about mainly is I would say is emotional based control. Okay, that's sort of, I think, quite a bit different when we're trying to control the actions or beliefs and ways of others, or to manipulate them, or to deceive them, or those types of
Because
things.
all
Those are emotional based.
Right, because as you said so eloquently, all we can control are our responses to external situations, unless there's something devastating that's about to happen and you have to take a child or yourself out of harm's way.
Yes.
I mean, the adult can be in harm's way as well,
Yes.
as we know.
Yes.
So yes, physically, logistically, you can do that. But in terms of dealing with, and again, we'll go back, use this in a divorce context. So we're getting divorced, we feel out of control.
Yes.
How do we calm ourselves down just to start with?
I would say meditate, exercise a lot, to get out of your head. I know whenever I have a lot of tension, anxiety is one of my first things is exercise. Another thing is...
You're a great tennis player, are you not? I believe you've won a few
thank
tournaments,
you. I've won a few
yes?
senior tournaments. I find very helpful, obviously, journaling, but what they call a gratitude list is when things are so out of control, is we really go to the negative. Things look so negative to us. So by taking some time and writing down some of the good things in my life, some of the things I'm grateful for, that brings a balance, a much needed balance, so that we are not going to be so out of control. But the fact of the matter is, at least my belief, and you know it better than me, is when a divorce or separation happens, it's like can be chaos. It's all fear, and it comes down to that again. Try not get into that future events already ruined. That's the same thing of the fear about don't go negative.
Yeah.
How many times have you speculated or assumed something to be one way and it turned out to be totally the opposite?
Yes. Like all the time.
So and that's because fear, fear just brings us there.
That's right.
Okay.
No, you're absolutely right about that. And what was the other way you defined the word? The other way you
false evidence appearing real.
There you go. There you go. So yes. So what happens when we are about to get divorced is just the whole idea of it has to wash over us, right? We have to absorb it. We have to grieve it. You said that in the book.
Yeah.
It's a loss.
It's a loss.
You must grieve it.
A grieve or loss, yes.
Sometimes we go in and out of denial. Maybe we can get it back. Maybe we should rethink. At least one parent or one person does that. So you have to accept the situation. You have to accept yourselves, then accept the situation, right?
Yes.
That it's going to happen.
Yes.
Okay. And then once we do that, we have a little bit more of a foundation to move forward. On an everyday level with control, I think we don't even realize when we're controlling most of the time.
No. That's where denial comes in. We are often in denial when we're not accepting the underlying reality or when we're controlling. And that's why I write a lot about the antidote for denial is awareness. We need to try to become aware of, wishful thinking is denial. Casting something aside is denial. Putting the blame maybe on something else is denial. Not owning up to our part in the situation, including in a divorce. It takes two to tango, And so what I've learned is, not necessarily in the divorce thing, but it would certainly apply there, is no matter what situation that I have found, quotes, unpleasant or didn't like, is that I had some part in it. I didn't see it right away, and that's where denial comes in. But if I was able to step back, examine, and be truthful, It could be just maybe that spark, that little 10% thing that fed into it.
Yeah.
So if I can be truthful and honest enough to accept that, what my role is in it, and I don't know if you get into that with your couples, is if they can begin to acknowledge to each other, so it takes you out of the blame game, right? That can start to go towards this acceptance.
And you said just a minute ago, denial is a process, or getting out of denial is a process.
Yes, yeah.
You don't recognize it at first. You have to kind of live with the situation. And then if you can take a step back and just realize that this was a group effort most of the time. Mm-hmm. Maybe there are those exceptional situations where you knew nothing, all of a sudden you were confronted with something shocking. I want to divorce.
Right.
That's less of the time than you knew something was going on.
Right.
And probably participatory. You know, I had a gentleman here, attorney Sid Kanazawa, a few weeks ago. He's Hawaiian, and he said there's a conflict resolution system in Hawaii, and I cannot say the Hawaiian word, and it goes like this. Whenever there's a conflict and you have people sitting at the table to resolve it, everybody involved in the conflict has to go around the table and merely say what their part was in it.
Well, yeah, that'd be fantastic. That'd be really fascinating to see that. And I bet that conflict gets resolved a lot faster, a lot easier, without so many hard feelings.
It's very much like Desmond Tutu's Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Mm-hmm. So after apartheid, Desmond Tutu comes in to rule the country, or the southern part of the country, right? And he develops the Truth and Reconciliation Commission so that everybody can talk about what happened and take responsibility.
Yes. Okay.
And then, I mean, he started seeing healing happen in front of him.
Right.
Which I thought was absolutely amazing. Yeah. You also talk about the health benefits of acceptance. Talk a little bit more about what acceptance does to you.
Well, when you're accepting, you're clearly less stressful. In other words, you're not stressing or worrying or having the anxiety. So you're going to be healthier from that alone. When you're accepting, you're not going to be controlling, and I think in most cases, excessively controlling behavior is also unhealthy. So both giving up control, letting go, or reducing control, and being able to accept more leads to greater serenity in our lives.
So maybe a little clue to our being in a control state, being in a state of not acceptance, because I'm a person who deals with logistics and I reduce everything to its smallest point. Physically, if we can just tune into how we feel physically, I'd like you to address this. Mm-hmm. That's one indication that maybe we're in control mode.
Or in denial mode. You know, like you asked about denial, like I said, to overcome denial, we have to become more aware. How do we become more aware? Well, and in the book, I have a series of questions that sort of try to key you into that. Like, if I'm feeling something, I'm very anxious today. I'm consumed and obsessing about something. So if I can get in touch with what the feeling is, then if I can go beyond that, is there something in my life that I'm not looking at? You know, that's it'd be a denial. You know, that I'm not seeing, that I'm not recognizing. So I agree with the physical part. It could be a physical reaction. I know in my case I've had physical reactions to different times in my life. You know, and that's a clue. That's our body telling us something's awry. And then when I know something's awry, maybe we could then query that. What might that be? And it might be, in the divorce context, it might be that I'm having absolutely no communication with my spouse, you know, or we are just so much in disagreement about our son John, you know, and I'm just feeling all this angst, you know. So it could be a lot of those things. And it's you know, I talk about acceptance, or practicing acceptance as a gradual thing. It's a lifelong thing. No one's totally accepting, but even little steps can bring really meaningful results.
Absolutely. I like you used the phrase practicing acceptance,
Yeah.
because it is
It is a
daily
practice, yes.
It is. And that is one of our challenges in life, is that we really control nothing. But don't fear. There is an order to the universe. And if we can accept that there's an order, do our best.
Yes.
Just do our best every day. Forgive ourselves for not apologizing when we need to.
Yes.
I think we can chip away, can't we?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
To conclude, do you have any advice for those of us married to control freaks or divorcing control freaks? Or should we have your exes come in here
No.
and talk about that?
You don't need to do that, because I can give some advice. Okay. I talk a lot about fear, and controllers are probably the most fearful people there are, because they're trying to control life or their lives, and life is inherently not controllable. So if we can see that, controllers need confidence. They need to know, they need confidence that everything's going to be okay in their lives, okay? When I was controlling, especially in business when I was younger, when I would deal with someone, could be in a legal context or whatever, and they were really competent, it really made me feel good. I didn't need to control so much, because I felt, they're as good or better than I am. So if you're on the other side of you could say the control freak or the controller or the micromanager, let them know that everything's going to be okay, that you're going to be able to handle it, and listen to them. Don't engage them. Remember what they're saying are their fears and anxieties, and don't take it personally. I know these are hard things, but if you cannot take it personally and look at it, what's coming from them, the actions are coming from them, are almost always fear-based. If you can begin to see that, you can better handle the situation. Now, in extreme cases, not only you disengage, leave the room, leave the building, So, in other words...
don't answer the email or the text.
So in other words, I have another friend that's what she does. And so she's dealing with this control freak sort of maniac, and she's trying to respond logically to his illogic, to his rants. Every time she does that, she gets a worse rant, a terrible rant back. And I tell her, don't respond. Don't engage. Step back, okay? So if you can begin to see that, it's going to help you in dealing with the controller.
That is fabulous advice. And I think that's a great way to end this episode. But you have to promise me you're going to come back.
Yeah, we'll come back. This was fun. Sure.
Thank you. And I hope you did have a great time doing this, because I know people are definitely getting benefit. Daniel, do you have another book that you're writing now? Should we look forward to something else? I
don't. I'm thinking about it, but if I had one, there's a couple. It's such a journey. The first book is 20 years to write, and this was 7 years. So it's a big commitment, because the way I write is very different. It's my own experiences. I'm trying to resolve my own challenges and my own problems, find the keys, and then interview people, and then the whole writing process. So I have some ideas that would be, I think, good, but I'm not sure I'm going to undertake them. Okay.
But in your blog, so I want people to be able to get in touch with you
I
now
write,
and experience you.
DanielAMiller.com. I have 70, short articles on control and acceptance. And now that my book's out and I have a little bit more time, I'm starting to write more blog posts, like the one I have right now is on the link between humility and acceptance. I have others about addiction and acceptance. A lot of fear, a lot on expectations, dealing with controllers, a lot of things like that. So that may end up in another book. The second book actually came from writing these posts and then saying, maybe there's a book here.
And there was.
And there turned out to be a book. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Okay, so you can get the books on Amazon, right?
Yeah,
Because that's
it's
where I
probably
got
the
them.
easiest. Amazon.com. I actually have an audio book on this one, and I'm very pleased with it. It's people seem to be responding to it. Or they can get Barnes & Noble, the ebook. They can go to the bookstores who will order it for them. iTunes has the ebook. Amazon's probably the easiest and least expensive way to get it.
Okay, so the audio book is for the
Gifts of Acceptance only. Yes.
Okay, so that's the audio book. The very first book of this nature was Losing Control.
Finding Serenity.
Finding Serenity.
That's only paperback, but through the same sources.
And if anybody wants to know more about investing in real estate syndicates, they can get your book, How to Invest. Is that on Amazon and what?
Yes, but it may be
print?
unavailable. That was 1978. Yeah.
I know I'm seeing this. Okay.
So.
This was such a pleasure. Thank you
Thank you.
so much.
Thank you, Judith.
DanielAMiller.com.
Yes.
And you can continue this with him. You can also reach me, Judy Weigel, at my email address, Judy, Judy, at constructiveuncoupling.com. Thank you all so very much for listening, and we will be back shortly. Take care.